Is Kit Hutchinson here. This is Kit's Rock Review, and I don't know if a lot of you know this, but I recently turned 50. And so, every time the decades change, every time you gain a new decade, you always start. And so I started doing that because I just turned 50. And then I remembered an old episode of Saturday, or not Saturday Night Live, I'm sorry, of Family Ties. And I remember Alex Keaton asking his sister Mallory what the meaning of life was. And Mallory said this. She said, "The meaning of life? That's easy. Be happy, help other people, and hope you fall in love." And after remembering that, I thought, I got 2 out of 3 of those. So I'm not doing too bad. I got to be happy and to help other people. That's generally me. But then I thought, love doesn't really have to be love with other people. You can be in love with other things. And of course, you know what? I love music. I really love music. It's become a big part of my life. So I got 3 out of 3. But today what I want to do is I want to share with you all out there some of the music that's been in my life that's really important, just to show you why, it starts out why I love music and what I still love about music today. So that's what I'm going to do today. So we're going to start out with this. We're going to start out with Paul Simon's Graceland. This is the album that, it came out just before my sophomore year of high school. And when I first heard the opening tracks to Boy in the Bubble, which is the first song on this record, I knew my life was going to be different from that point on. It starts off, da, 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 and then bang, that first big drum beat. I've owned many copies of this. I originally had it on vinyl, and I played it so often that every track would just skip. Then I got it on cassette. I had a cassette version of it, and I played it so much in my old car stereo that the cassette casing was starting to come apart. I bought it on CD eventually. I bought it on enhanced CD, and as you can see, this one is the 25th anniversary CD. Someone's got to put Paul Simon's kids through college, so I guess it's me. I love this album, and I love not just the big hits on it, not just You Can Call Me Al and Boy in the Bubble, but, and Graceland, the title cut, but I love the South African music. I love just some of the sort of folkish stuff. I mean, this album, when I heard this, it changed my life. It brought me into music, and I've been listening to music ever since because of this album. So right after I got this, well, not right after, but, I was like, what else has Paul Simon done? Well, luckily, my parents had the old vinyl copy of Simon and Garfunkel's Bookends album. So, what did I do? Put it on the record player, put on these big, huge headphones, and I listened to that. I listened to that a lot. I would spend hours listening to that. It's almost like escaping into another world. And if you have the old album, or if you still have the new vinyl of it, because it's probably been remastered on vinyl again, you'll notice that side 1 is sort of a mini concept album. It's sort of like a life. It starts out Life of My Child and then ends with Old Friends. Side 2 is sort of really what's all these B-side singles that they had lying around. So they put it on that album. And then it also has Mrs. Robinson on it, but it's got like Fake in It, Punky's Dilemma, At the Zoo. I mean, this is a really good album. So I would get Bookends if you haven't gotten it. And of course, nowadays it's easy because you just stream it. But there's just something about owning a physical copy that I like that I don't think anyone else... The young kids today don't understand. Well, my parents also had another old vinyl. They had Sgt Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band on vinyl. And it's another album that I used to put the big headphones on when I was in high school and listen to it and escape into the world of Sgt. Pepper and his Lonely Hearts Club Band. And I don't know what else to say about this album. If you haven't listened to the album, do so. I mean, you probably the popular tracks. With a little help from my friends, When I'm 64, A Day in the Life. But to me, listening to it all at once, as it was meant when the Beatles recorded, they recorded it as a concept album. And if you listen to it all at once, all together, I find it to be a mind-blowing experience. I did when I know young teenage pre-beard, pre-long hair Kit Hutchinson, especially when you listen to it and the last song is A Day in the Life and it ends with that one boom. It's just an amazing album. So if you can get it and listen to it its entirety, don't listen to it as a chopped up bunch of songs. Okay? Well, also, I was into Simon and Garfunkel, and I really fell in love with those vocal harmonies because, I can't sing. But I discovered other bands, through Simon and Garfunkel. I discovered other bands that had initials with their names in them. So, like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Another law firm type band. And when I was in junior high, I remember hearing, the song The Southern Cross. It's still my favorite Crosby, Stills, and Nash song. And I may have false memories, but it does remind me of junior high, Southern Cross and Waste Down the Way. I mean, this is not their best album by any means. But afterwards, I've got the entire CSN and CSNY with Neil Young collection. Plus, I got a lot of their solo albums, a lot of their duo albums. So this is a very important album just because of the Southern Cross. I forgot to bring out my ukulele, or else I'd play the opening part to it. It's C, C, F, F, G. But anyway, CSN, another influential band group in my life. And speaking, I was a teenager in the mid-'80s. Yes. And so, yes, I listened to a lot of Genesis. I listened to a lot of Invisible Touch. It came out between my freshman and sophomore years of high school. And as a teenager, you could not escape, in the mid-'80s, you could not escape the song Land of Confusion. And this actually became, we had, my friends and I had the cassette. Side one became the song we listened to while we were driving around. We even did in Rome, where I grew up, there was a tunnel. And in Land of Confusion, there's one line that goes, oh! And my friends and I, we'd drive through this tunnel, time it right so we could get that, oh, an echo as we were driving through the tunnel. And I know that this is not the best Genesis album. I know there are other Genesis. I mean, it's not a bad album. But for Genesis, it's not a great album. It's very popish. But someday I'm going to do a whole rock review about this album and how it actually is still prog rock. But that's for another day. But my friends and I still love this album. But this is the gateway drug for me into the prog rock of Genesis. If I didn't hear this, I wouldn't have listened to Duke. I wouldn't have listened to A Trick of the Tail. I would have listened to Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. I wouldn't have listened to Selling England by the Pound. So through this album, I came to appreciate prog rock. And speaking of high school albums, another album that came out just as I was ending high school was Tom Petty. I almost said Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, but this is Tom Petty's first solo album, Full Moon Fever. My friends and I would also listen to this while we were driving around, but we would change the lyrics to match our hometown. Yeah, instead of Ventura Boulevard, it became Black River Boulevard. And you guys know all the hits on this. Free Fallin', I Won't Back Down, Love is a Long Road. But I like some of the other stuff. I would like albums as albums. So I like some of the minor songs that people don't know, like The Apartment Song, Depending on You, All Right for Now, and it has a Byrds cover on here, Feel a Whole Lot Better. Another album you need to check out is this. And, of course, my interest in Tom Petty doesn't stop with this or with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Let me put that down. But, the Traveling Wilburys. Tom Petty, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne of ELO, Roy Orbison, Bob Dylan. Traveling Wilburys Volume... This is actually a collection of both Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 and Traveling Wilburys Volume 3. But Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 is the album that... It came out when I was a senior in high school. And every song on it is a classic. I mean, everyone knows Handle with Care and End of the Line. Those are the two singles. But every song is a classic. I think that there's a song on here that Roy Orbison sings called Not Alone Anymore. That could have been a solo hit for Roy Orbison. I mean, even Tweeter and the Monkey Man, that could have been a hit for Bob Dylan by himself. Every song is great on this album. In fact, in college, I switched from cassettes to CDs. I didn't get a CD player until I was in college. And the goal of my friend John and I was actually to find Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 on CD because it was out of print for a while in the 90s and the early 2000s. It was sort of our quest, our holy grail was to find Volume 1. And I think we finally found it as a German import. Back in the day when you couldn't just go on Spotify or Amazon Music and listen to anything you wanted, you actually had to go to a used record store and flip through the records to try to find that one record that you were missing for your collection. People today just don't appreciate that. I still like going in record stores, although they're few and far between, and just flipping through the albums, flipping through the CDs, seeing what I can find to add to my collection. As I said, I like physical albums. When I buy something, I actually want to have something that I can touch. It's not the same going on Spotify, going on Amazon Prime. But I'm ranting like an old man again. Anyway, another high school thing that's sort of classic rock-ish. By the way, I just found out that these guys are going to go on a farewell tour next year. Yes, the Monkees. I was a fan of the Monkees in the, remember, 80s. When I was in high school, MTV was actually still music television, and they used to broadcast reruns of the Monkees show on MTV. And I would stay up late if they were on late at night, and I would stay up late to watch them. And I loved them. As you can see, I actually bought here. This is called the Classic Album Series. So it's all the albums that they came out in the '60s when they were still a viable act, when there was still a TV show on. But for some reason, I was like Mike. And when they reunited in the '80s, Mike wasn't part of the reunion. But I was like Mike. He seemed the weird. I've always liked the sort of the secondary people in bands. But Circle Sky is one of my favorite songs. Of course, I don't have to tell you guys the hits that the Monkees had. He also wrote Mary Mary, even though he didn't sing it. Papa Jean's Blues. How can you not like Pleasant Valley Sunday? And they actually had a movie. It was kind of a weird movie called Head. The vinyl for that album was literally it was all silver, and if you looked at it, you saw your head. So track that down. It didn't do very well because people thought that the movie was going to be like their TV show, and it was really more psychedelic. But it's become a cult classic. I would suggest you find out about that. Go find it. I don't know if it's on Amazon or Prime or what, but it's a cult classic. Little strange, but it's got some great music in it. And so, as I was ending high school, by the way, we're progressing through my years here. As I was ending high school, I don't have a lot of their albums, The Who, but they're another band I listened to in high school. And part of the reason I don't have a lot of their albums is my best friend from high school. His name's John. He was a big Who fan, and he had all their albums. So if ever I wanted to listen to anything, I just borrowed his albums. So consequently, I don't have a lot, and I really need to get more. I mean, I got Who's Next, I've got Quadrophenia, I've got some of their reunion albums, and I got a bunch of their greatest hits albums. But I don't have Tommy, and I don't have the Who Sell Out, which is a shame. I think I know what I'm going to do when I get off this. I might be going on to Amazon Prime and seeing if I can find a copy of Tommy. Anyway, there are two special memories that I have of The Who in high school. And it's actually sort of after high school. During the summer, between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, The Who went on a reunion tour. And my friend John, as I said, he's a big fan of The Who. But they would broadcast The Who's concerts on the radio. So we'd be driving around in the car listening to those concerts on the radio. And so the summer between my senior year and my freshman year of college was sort of a year of The Who, because I remember listening to all these concerts. I remember going to a baseball game in Syracuse, and as we were going out there, we were listening to the Who concert, and John was recording it on cassette on his portable cassette player. And also, 2 nights before John and I both went to college, we rented a pay-per-view of Tommy concert that The Who broadcast. And to me, that sort of always symbolizes the end of high school and the beginning of college, that Who concerts. It's just a very special memory I have. So, The Who, Pinball Wizard, See Me, Feel Me, We're Not Gonna Take It. It's always been sort of that special memory for me. Okay, So then we move on to the Kit Hutchinson, the college music years. And I was still very much into classic rock when I was in college. My favorite radio station was a station out of Syracuse called Kix FM 104.7. I didn't really consider WOUR, even though they call themselves a classic rock station now. I didn't consider them classic rock because they played some newer stuff. I was like seriously very into classic rock. But this came out, so you don't get the glare off my computer screen here. Neil Young, Freedom. I remember it coming out my freshman year of college. I remember sitting in my dorm room watching Saturday Night Live on my little tiny TV, watching Neil Young debut. We hadn't even heard it before, Rockin' in the Free World, and we were like we didn't know what to make of it, believe it or not, because Neil Young, he'd been genre jumping in the 80s. He did right before this, he did a blues album, Neil Young and the Blue Notes, This Note's For You, and we know that during the 80s, he did some country stuff and he did some folk stuff. So when we heard Rockin' in the Free World, we're like, is he going metal now? But, I was a fan of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, which, Neil Young is affiliated with them, with Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. So it wasn't too hard for me to become a Neil Young fan. And if you could see the cabinet where I keep it's actually just behind me, but I'm not going to open it up for you. If you could see all the CDs, I have every Neil Young CD, well, almost everyone. He recorded these albums for Geffen in the early 80s, which were like electronic experimental. I don't have those. But I do have a greatest hits from the Geffen years compilation. But I became such a big Neil Young fan that, I went to Toronto to see him when he played with, it was an amazing concert. Neil Young was the main act, but the opening acts were Blues Traveler, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden. And then at the end, Pearl Jam came and played Rockin' in the Free World with Neil Young. But this album was what all started my Neil Young obsession. And I've got one major complaint, if I could meet Mr. Neil Young, is that the only song that he ever plays off this in concert is Rockin' in the Free World. And the rest of the album's amazing, and he doesn't ever play it in concert. Crime in the City. I know, maybe you've never heard of these, but Hanging on a Limb, El Dorado, and El Dorado lived a great bullfighter, and then there's this great guitar. He covers On Broadway, The Neon Lights, They're Bright on Broadway. Wrecking Ball, No More. I mean, I don't know why he doesn't play more of this in concert. Neil, if you're watching Kit's Rock Review, why don't you do a whole concert where you just play this album, and I'll be really happy. Okay? Okay. I know you're listening to me, Neil. As I said, at college, I was the classic rock guy. I worked at the college radio station. I had my own classic rock show. I called myself the classic rock messiah. But most of that radio station at college was, pretty much alternative during the day. There was some urban and dance music at night, but during the day it was alternative. And at that station, I discovered the 10,000 Maniacs before they became famous. However, the first 10,000 Maniacs album I ever bought was Our Time in Eden, which is the album that broke them through. It's where they had their biggest hits, like These Are the Days, Candy Everybody Wants. But I bought it before they were famous. I knew them before they were famous. And actually, this is the first band that I liked that had a female lead singer. But my favorite 10,000 Maniac song isn't from this album. My favorite 10,000 Maniac song is Like the Weather, which is from their 1987 album Our Time in Eden, or their 1987 album In My Tribe, which is another great album. Another memory I have with this is the first time my brother and I, my younger brother Adam and I, went to a concert. It was a 10,000 Maniacs concert in Saratoga. So it's a little special memory I have going to a concert for the first time with my younger brother. Another band I discovered in college, and this is more of an appropriate band for 10,000 Maniacs are appropriate. More of a what you would expect from me is, the Black Crowes. I discovered them when they opened for ZZ Top, and actually went to a record store and bought the cassette, so I knew what they'd sound like before I saw them. And I was impressed. I mean, ZZ Top is a good band. I like ZZ Top, but I was more impressed with the Black Crowes when I saw the concert. And then I remember when their second album, Southern Harmony Musical Companion, came out, I remember actually going to the Last Unicorn in Utica, and because it used to be records were released on a Tuesday. Now they're released on Friday. But it used to be records were released on Tuesday. I remember being at the dorm at Utica College, getting in my car so I could go to Last Unicorn when it opened. I drove there. They didn't even have these on the shelf yet. They were still in a box on the floor. I went in, grabbed a copy, went to the cashier, drove back to Utica College, was heading up to my dorm room, and my friend Josh was there, and I was like, look what I got, and I held this up. And it's actually this album, too. And he was like, look what I got, and he held up the same album. He hadn't gone to Last Unicorn, but we both were like, both had it. This really rock. This is real rock and roll. This is what I've been waiting for, because a lot of the bands, a lot of the music that came out when I was late high school and in college I didn't consider real rock. This is what I was waiting for, a new band that was playing real rock and roll, Remedy, Sting Me, Bad Luck Blue Eyes, Hotel Illness. This is what I wanted. That's what I got. That's what I listened to for a long time. Still listen to it. Still have and supposed to see the Black Crowes last year in concert. Hopefully they'll be going out this year to celebrate their anniversary, the Robinson Brothers. But, great influential album on me and my music listening. Then we get sort of after college, and we start with these guys, Government Mule. This is the Deep End Volume 1. My friend Brian, he's a college friend of mine, we went to see a Neil Young concert in Saratoga, and as we're driving there, he pops in Government Mule's debut album on the car stereo, and it was awesome. That's the first album I ended up buying, and then I bought Dose. But I didn't really become a big Government Mule fan until the year 2000. Brian was up visiting, and we went to a festival called the Blues, Brews, and Barbecue. It was in Syracuse. It was at the State Fairgrounds. And Government Mule was the opening act, and they just had an awesome set there. And then I was so impressed with them that a week later, I went to Rhode Island and drove out to Rhode Island with Brian, and we saw them at this small little tiny bar. And I became that's what got me into Government Mule. And I went and saw him as often as I could. I guess you could say I was a mule head, if such a thing exists. I would go see him as often as I can. In fact, one time I saw them, they played Rochester, Syracuse, and Albany, and I saw all the shows. And this album they recorded after the death of their original bassist. And I remember hearing them that they were going to record this, called The Deep End Volume 1. And I was so waiting for it to come out. And it seemed to me it took forever for this thing to come out. But it was only probably like 6 months to 8 months. But this album just features the two original members, Warren Haynes and Matt Apps, the guitarist and drummer, and then a series of guest musicians. The bass players on this were all either friends of the original bass player, Alan Woody, or people he admired. But to me, this is still the favorite Government Mule album. And I remember one time I went and when I saw them, they played the first half of the album. And then I saw them a few days later, they played the second half of the album. But it's got On the Banks of the Deep End, Where I Lost My Best Friend. And that was sort of the sentiment because this was recorded after the bass player died. It's even got a version of Effigy, which is a Creedence Clearwater Revival song. And the original Creedence song is like 3 minutes, but when Government Mule does it, it's a 9-minute song. So, Government Mule, check out any of their albums, but this is my favorite Government Mule album on the Deep End Volume 1. And of course, if you become a Government Mule fan, you then automatically become an Allman Brothers fan. Why? Because Warren Haynes, who's the lead guitarist and singer and songwriter of Government Mule, he was in the Allman Brothers in the 90s, and then he rejoined in 2001, and for a while, he was doing both Government Mule and the Allman Brothers. He'd split his time between. So, because I became a Government Mule fan, I had to become an Allman Brothers fan, and I liked the Allman Brothers anyway, I just wasn't that into them until I got into Government Mule. And my youngest brother, he once said that I would go anywhere and do anything to see the Allman Brothers, and he was probably right. I went and saw them a lot. My biggest memory from seeing the Allman Brothers is when we saw them, Brian, myself, and another friend of ours, John. We saw them in New York City at the Beacon Theater in 2003. The Allman Brothers, and they played the song "No One to Run With," which is a fairly popular song. But the writer of that song, his name was Dickie Betts. His name is Dickie Betts. He left the band. The band says he left. He says he was fired. Whatever. He was no longer in the band. They didn't play a lot of his songs, especially a lot of his songs that he sang. But in 2003 at the Beacon Theater in March was the first time they played that since he left. And it was the encore. The crowd went wild. I remember seeing people jump up and down when they started playing No One to Run With. So that's sort of my memory of seeing the Allman Brothers at the Beacon Theater. And this album was their last studio album. And I have a specific memory of this. I remember when I moved out of my hometown, I remember coming to sign my lease for my apartment, and this album, they were having an interview with Greg Allman for this album, and he was talking about it. And at that point, it was called The Victory Dance. It's called Hitting. They didn't end up calling it. They called it Hitting the Note. And despite the fact it's a latter-day Allman Brothers album, it's one of their best. You know, the song Desdemona that Greg wrote with Warren Haynes, some of the best guitar work Warren Haynes plays is on that, and he gets sort of this little guitar duelish thing with Derek Trucks, who's the other guitarist in the Allman Brothers at this point. Then there's Instrumental Illness, which Warren Haynes wrote with the bass player O'Teal, which is an amazing... and this album ends with a song called Old Friend, and music is the old friend in this one. And the old music is my old friend, and that's the only Allman Brothers band track that does not feature an original member of the Allman Brothers. It features Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks, and that's it. And neither of them were in the original, and it's what ends the Allman Brothers' last studio album. And I've always thought of it sort of looking to the future. Even though they didn't come out with another studio album after that, it's sort of like, you know, things aren't going anywhere. We're still here. Music is our friend. Music should be your friend. Okay. And the latter-day Allman Brothers also introduced me to this group, the Tadeski Trucks Band. And I know you can't see it, but I'm actually wearing a Tadeski Trucks Band t-shirt as well. Derek Trucks. He is the nephew of Butch Trucks, the original drummer of the Allman Brothers Band. And his wife is Susan Tadeski. She's a guitarist and singer. And they merged their solo bands because they didn't feel they were spending enough time together. So they merged their two solo bands to make the Tadeski Trucks Band. Figured they could spend more time together as a family. And of course, you know, if you know anything about me, you know this is one of my current co-favorite bands. Government Mule and these guys are my co-favorite bands. And this is their first album called Revelator. It's the first album of theirs I bought. Not necessarily my favorite, but it's a good... And Tadeski Trucks, they brought me out of a musical depression. I've posted about that before, but back in 2017, Memorial Day weekend, Greg Allman died, and I became a little musically depressed, being the big Allman Brothers fan that I had become, knowing that I'd never see the Allman Brothers again. It just, you know, I could listen to stuff. It didn't seem to excite me. Didn't seem to be alive anymore because I knew Greg was dead. And then I went and saw the Tadeski Trucks Band. I know, and it was more like going through the motions to see them. And then their encore was, they did a cover of Ain't Wasting Time No More by the Allman Brothers, followed by Will the Circle Be Unbroken, which is a traditional song, but Greg Allman had done it on one of his solo albums, and that brought me back from my musical depression. There are videos of it on YouTube, and I think you can audibly hear me scream, yeah, when they start playing the piano opening to Ain't Wasting Time No More. And ever since then, I've become a big, big Tadeski Trucks fan. But, you know, with my musical likenesses, it wasn't hard for me to do anyway. So that's my story of the Tadeski Trucks. And this album, come out and see Bound for Glory, Ball and Chain, These Walls, Shelter Me. Pick it up. It's a good album. And I got one more album that I'm going to talk about. Wow, I've been talking for almost half an hour. Wow. As you know, a lot of us last year was the year of COVID, deep, dark COVID. We were all like confined, hard to go out, hard to do anything. One thing I did during that is I went on these long drives. And I don't know why, but for some reason, I kept sticking Jackson Browne in the car stereo. I mean, this is the best of Jackson Browne, 2 CDs, and it would last me a long time on the drive. I also had some other Jackson Browne CDs, the individual like Late for the Sky, For Every Man, Saturate with Water, Time the Conqueror. But this, I don't know, since I couldn't do anything, I went on these long drives, I put Jackson Browne in the stereo, and that seemed to bring me joy, seemed to bring me hope, listening to Rock Me on the Water, The Barricade of Heaven, Looking East, For Every Man, Tender is the Night, Run on Empty. They all seem to bring me joy. I Am a Patriot. It just helped me feel really well, even though I knew that, with the pandemic going on, The Night Inside Me. It just helped me get through things on that ride that I would take, get through things when I couldn't do anything. So I've said this has sort of become my go-to album for hope, even though it's a compilation. I don't generally listen to compilations. So I started this little video 30 minutes ago with the meaning of life from Family Ties. Be happy, help other people, and hope you fall in love. Well, I've shown you in this video the music that I've fallen in love with. So I'd like to know what you think about the music that I've fallen in love with, and I'd also like to know what music you fell in love with. What about you? What are your favorite albums, your favorite artists, your favorite songs that you love with music? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys write. And until next time, we're going to follow Neil Young's advice and keep on rocking in the free world, and I'll talk to you later.